12 hours into a double shift and my patience was worn thinner than a hospital gown. The charge nurse slid a new chart into my hand. "Triage room 3, abdominal pain demanding," she said, her voice flat with exhaustion. I didn't bother looking at the name. Didn't care. All I saw in my mind's eye was another privileged kid with a low pain tolerance, probably fishing for a prescription. I just wanted the shift to end. Then I flipped open the chart, saw the last name in bold print, and the hum of the ER faded to a roar in my ears. 15 years vanished in a single gut-wrenching moment. I almost threw the chart in the bin. Almost. Standing there under the flickering fluorescent lights, I thought the only thing that felt real. If I treat her, I have to face the man who saved my life. If I didn't, and something was truly wrong, I'd be betraying the very reason I ever became a nurse. And that name, her last name, was the reason for all of it. I'd already dealt with a 6-car pileup, a tourist who thought a scorpion sting was a mosquito bite, and now security was wrestling a drunk in the waiting room. I glanced toward room 3. A young woman, maybe early 20s, dressed in clothes that cost more than my rent. She was pale, clutching her side, but my cynical brain had already written her story, spoiled, entitled, here for the drama. Then I saw the surname, Seagal. My mouth went dry. Seagal, the name that was etched into the single most terrifying and defining night of my life. A coincidence, I told myself. It's a big city. But my hands started to tremble like they did when I was a teenager, hiding in a closet and listening to my mother's screams. I pushed through the curtain. She was curled on her side, face tight with pain. Even so, I let my judgment lead. 40 minutes left in my shift. I could pass this off. The triage tech caught my eye. "Dave, you taking this one?" "She can wait," I heard myself say, the words tasting like acid. "I have more critical patients." The tech frowned. "She looks pretty bad, man." I shrugged, a cold and ugly thing. Looks can be deceiving. I took 3 steps toward the nurse's station, but a sharp gasp from the room stopped me. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was the sound of someone trying, and failing, to hold back a wave of agony. My feet refused to move. I hadn't even bothered to treat her like a human being. Back at the desk, I snatched the clipboard again. First name, Arissa. Arissa Seagal. The woman in that room, the one I'd dismissed as a spoiled brat, was the daughter of the man I owed everything to. The man who had, without hesitation, walked into the worst night of my family's life and brought us out the other side. My own dismissive words echoed in my head. I stared at the door to room 3 as if it were the gate to my own personal judgment. I hadn't thought about that night in years. I was 15. 2 men had broken into our house. My father was out of town. They had my mother cornered in the kitchen. I was frozen, hiding. Then the door burst open and 2 sheriff's deputies were there. One of them was a volunteer, a reserve deputy, but he moved with an unnerving calm. It was Steven Seagal. He didn't shout. He just spoke, his voice low and absolute, and the entire violent scene froze. He diffused it all. He saved my mother's life. Later, he sat with me while I gave my statement, told me that courage wasn't about not being scared, but about doing what's right even when you are. I decided that night I would spend my life paying that forward. I looked at the assignment board. I could claim a personal conflict, invent some reason to pass her chart to someone else, and hide in the supply closet until my shift ended. But the shame was already a physical weight in my chest. I had just shown contempt to the daughter of my own personal hero. My burnout, my cynicism, they weren't excuses. They were poisons. The oath I took screamed in my mind. Compassion, dignity, advocacy. My bias had made me violate every one of those tenets. I had looked at his daughter and failed the very test he had inspired me to prepare for. I scrubbed my hands until they were raw. I pushed the curtain back. Arissa's eyes opened wide and fearful. There was no entitlement there, only pain. Hi, I'm David. I'm your nurse, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I am so sorry for your wait. I'm going to take care of you now. She just nodded, tears brimming. I took her blood pressure. It was low. Her abdomen was rigid. I started an IV, my hands moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. She winced as the needle went in. Thank you, she whispered. The simple words felt like a punch to the gut. While I drew her blood, she spoke in short, pained bursts. My dad's on his way. He told me to be strong. Each word dismantled the ugly caricature I had built in my head. She wasn't demanding. She was scared and trying to be brave for her father. She had his eyes, focused, intense. She asked my name again. David, I repeated. It's a good, strong name, she said, trying to smile through the pain. My throat closed up. Minutes later, her blood work came back. Her white count was through the roof. Her pressure was dropping. This was a textbook ruptured appendix, and she was heading toward septic shock. This was a surgical emergency. As I was calling the on-call surgeon, the automatic doors to the ambulance bay slid open with a hiss. A big man in a black jacket strode in, his eyes scanning the chaos until they locked on room 3. It was him. Steven Seagal. My past and present were colliding right in front of me. He moved toward me, his focus entirely on the curtain his daughter was behind. I'm here for Arissa Seagal. Sir, I said, my voice tight. She's critically ill. She needs emergency surgery right now. Her appendix has likely ruptured. His face, which I remembered as being so calm, was now a mask of fatherly terror. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. There was no flicker of recognition. I was just the nurse standing between him and his child. I got the surgeon on the phone and spoke with a frantic urgency. Dr. Evans, this is David in the ER. I have a 22-year-old female, Arissa Seagal, with an acute abdomen and signs of sepsis. We need an OR now. We wasted time on my end. I was owning it. It was the only thing I could do. The surgeon, hearing the alarm in my voice, just said, I'm on my way. I hung up and began coordinating the transport, my shame fueling a desperate need to make things right. As we pushed Arissa's gurney toward the elevators, Mr. Seagal walked beside us, his hand on her shoulder. He looked over at me. Do I know you? He asked, his voice quiet. No, sir, I mumbled, unable to look him in the eye. I'm just the nurse. He put his other hand on my shoulder, a heavy, solid weight. Thank you for helping her. The quiet sincerity of his gratitude was more humiliating than any reprimand could have been. He was thanking me for doing the job I had almost refused to do for his daughter. While Arissa was in surgery, I found Mr. Seagal in the deserted surgical waiting room. My shift was over, but I couldn't leave. I had to confess. I sat in the chair across from him. Mr. Seagal, my name is David. 15 years ago, you were a reserve deputy. You answered a home invasion call on Elm Street. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly in concentration. He listened, his face unreadable as the story spilled out of me. That was my house. You saved my mother's life that night. You're the reason I became a nurse. My voice broke. And when your daughter came in tonight, I failed you. I judged her. I was arrogant and cruel, and I made her wait in pain. I am so sorry. I finally looked up, ready for his anger, for his disappointment. He was silent for a long time, just watching me. The silence was deafening. Then he spoke, his voice low and even. I remember that night. I'm glad your mother was okay. He leaned forward slightly. You made a mistake, but you corrected it. You're helping my daughter now. You're doing what's right. That's all that matters. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It was something more profound. It was an acknowledgement of the truth, and a quiet order to continue to make it right. That was his justice. An hour later, the surgeon came out looking tired. The surgery was a success. Her appendix had ruptured. It was a good thing you acted when you did. A little longer, and we would have been in real trouble." Mr. Seagal shook the doctor's hand, then turned and looked directly at me. He gave one single emphatic nod. In that moment, a debt was acknowledged and my redemption began. I asked to be assigned as Arissa's primary nurse in the recovery unit. My supervisor was confused, but approved it. For the next 3 days, I was by her side, managing her pain, checking her vitals, and treating her with the care and dignity she deserved from the very beginning. I wasn't just treating a patient. I was honoring a debt and rebuilding my own broken code of ethics. A few days later, Arissa was walking the halls, her father at her side. He and I spoke, not about that night 15 years ago, but about healing. He talked about how in martial arts the hardest thing to do is recognize a flaw in your own form and have the discipline to fix it. "You're a good nurse," he said as Arissa rested in her room. "Don't let the world make you forget that." On the day of her discharge, I walked them down to the main entrance. Arissa, looking 1,000 times better, turned and gave me a hug. "Thank you, David," she said. Mr. Seagal shook my hand, his grip firm. "You take care of yourself, son." As they left, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Arissa's recovery was a turning point for me. I never again looked at a patient and saw a label. I saw a story. I cut back on my overtime and started mentoring new nurses, telling them the story of the night I almost let my cynicism destroy my purpose. When I get tired and jaded, I remember the look of terror on a father's face and the quiet dignity of his daughter. I remember that every chart is a person who is loved by someone. That night, a spoiled brat didn't walk into my ER. The daughter of the man who saved my life did, and in the end, she and her father ended up saving me too.